So I'm back today with another motherboard unboxing and overview, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Z890i AORUS Ultra. This is a mini ITX motherboard compatible with Intel's Core Ultra processors. In the UK it's going to cost you just under £300, so let's go ahead and get it unboxed and take a closer look at it. So this is everything that comes in the box with our motherboard. So we've got some paperwork including our installation guide, we've got some AORUS stickers, we've got the antenna for our Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4, we've got two SATA data cables, we've got two extension cables for our fan connectors. These are for our chassis fan 1 and CPU opt fan connectors. They don't have standard connectors on the motherboard and you are going to have to use this short extension cable. We've got a screw for securing our M.2 SSD on the back of the motherboard, and we've got two screws for securing the bottom right of our motherboard to the case. They come with different threads, and when we take a look at the motherboard you'll see why we've got these screws. So taking a closer look at the motherboard, working along the bottom from left to right, really the only connector we have at the bottom of the motherboard is our HD audio connector at the bottom left. And then we've got our single Gen 5x16 PCIe slot. This slot will run in x16 mode and the PCIe lanes come from the CPU. It's good to see this slot is reinforced and it has an Easy Latch Plus button which you can simply press to open the clip on the slot. And I think this button is the reason we've got the special screws in the motherboard box. You can see we're not going to be able to fit a standard screw through the slot in the bottom right of the motherboard. I'm going to have to use one of those long screws that comes in the box with the motherboard. And as I say, there's two different threads on the screws, so you're going to have to pick the one that goes with your case. Working up the right hand side of the motherboard, first of all we've got our front panel Type-C connector and it supports speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second. We've got two connectors behind it. The bottom one is our clear CMOS jumper and we've got our speaker header just above it. We've then got a TPN header and our front panel connectors are just behind it. We've then got a forward facing USB 3.2 Gen 1 header which will support speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second. And again we've got two connectors behind it. The black 2-pin connector is a reset jumper, and then just above it we've got a USB 2.0 header. Just above this we've got two SATA ports, and then we've got our 24-pin motherboard power connector. Working along the top of the motherboard from right to left, just above our RAM slots we've got our debug LEDs which you'll find useful if you need to troubleshoot the motherboard. We've then got our motherboard's one and only system fan header, followed by our CPU opt header. You'll notice that these are smaller non-standard connectors, and this is why we're going to have to use the included extension cables in the box with these headers. We've then got two 3-pin 5V addressable ARGB connectors, followed by our CPU fan header, and this is a standard connector. At the top left of the motherboard we've got a single 8-pin EPS power connector. The motherboard features an 8+1+2 digital VRM design, and we've got large aluminium heat sinks over the VRM connected up with a heat pipe. And this heat pipe does extend down to the heatsink over our M.2 SSD. In the middle of the motherboard we've got our LGA 1851 socket and standard mounting holes. We've got two RAM slots and the motherboard will accommodate up to a maximum of 128 gigabytes of DDR5 at up to 9200 megatransfers per second overclocked. The motherboard has two M.2 slots, there's one on the front and one on the back. The M.2 slot on the front of the motherboard is a Gen 5 slot and it will run in x4 or x2 mode. We've got a large heatsink over the front slot. You simply need to push the lever on the left hand side of the heatsink up and then the heatsink can be lifted away. Again, installing your M.2 in the socket is going to be completely toolless. All you need to do is push it down and the clip will hold it in place. Our second M.2 slot is on the back of the motherboard. This is a Gen 4 slot and it will run in x4 or x2 mode. You are going to have to secure this one using the M.2 screw that comes in the box, and there's no heatsink included for it. Taking a look at our rear I/O, first of all we've got DisplayPort 2.1 and HDMI 2.1 ports. And then we've got a Thunderbolt 4/USB 4 Type-C port. This port can support speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second. It also supports Thunderbolt and DisplayPort video outputs. We've got 5 USB Type-A ports on the back of the motherboard. The 3 red ones are USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports supporting speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second, while the 2 blue ones are USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports supporting speeds of up to 5 gigabits per second. We've also got our Q-Flash Plus button, which you're going to need if you want to flash your BIOS, and it's the top red port that you're going to plug your USB stick into if you want to do this. In terms of networking, we've got a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, and then we've got the antenna ports for our Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4. At the bottom, we've got our audio connectors, which consist of SPDIF, mic and line out ports. So there's an awful lot I like about this motherboard. ITX doesn't tend to be cheap, but for just under £300 for the latest generation of ITX motherboard, it does seem pretty good value for money. I think the cooling looks to be really good over the VRM. We've got beefy heat sinks and they're connected up with a heat pipe. I think the button on the bottom for releasing your graphics card is going to be really useful in those tight ITX systems. Really the only downside is it means you have to use a special screw to secure the motherboard to your case. And I'm not a big fan of these custom connectors here. We are going to have to use cable extensions for your system fan header and your CPU opt header. But apart from that, it looks to be a really solid motherboard, and I'm looking forward to getting it into a build on the channel soon. If you have enjoyed this unboxing and overview, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.